The space station was quiet except for the soft hum of air recyclers. Commander Velthas stood before the judges, his blue-scaled hands clasped behind his back. He had fought in 12 wars across the galaxy. He had seen species rise and fall, but nothing had prepared him for what he witnessed fighting against humans. Judge Mordoun leaned forward in his chair, his 3 eyes focused on the Corvani warrior. Commander, you stand before this tribunal to testify about human war crimes during the Third Sector War. The Council expects your full cooperation. Velthas nodded slowly. His throat made a clicking sound, a nervous habit from his species. Your Honor, I will tell you everything I saw, but I must warn you, what humans did was not what you expect. The judge's middle eye narrowed. Explain. We expected monsters, Velthas began. The report said humans were brutal, savage. They had joined the galactic community only 2 years ago. We thought they would fight like animals. Velthas paused, remembering. My first battle with humans was on Kepler 442b, a mining world with 3 million workers. My fleet of 40 ships surrounded the planet. The humans had maybe 8 vessels, old ones, patched and rebuilt many times. The courtroom was silent. Even the recording devices seemed to hold their breath. Standard military doctrine says the smaller force should surrender or run. The humans did neither. Captain Li Hyun, their commander, sent us a message. He said they would resist, but they wanted to talk first. Judge Mordoun frowned. Talk during combat? Yes. Li Hyun told us there were civilians on the planet, miners and their families. He said if we wanted the mining facility, we could have it, but he asked for 72 hours to evacuate the civilians. What did you do? Velthas looked down at his claws. Even now, the memory troubled him. I laughed. We all did. I told him he had 1 hour. After that, we would take the planet by force. The commander's voice grew softer. The humans said they understood. Then they did something impossible. They fought us for exactly 72 hours. Not 71. Not 73. Exactly 72. How is that impossible? Your Honor, my fleet had 40 ships. Advanced weapons. Shields that could stop plasma cannons. The humans had 8 old ships and ground-based weapons from their homeworld. They should have been destroyed in minutes. Velthas began pacing, his tail swishing behind him, but they fought like nothing I had ever seen. They used the asteroids around the planet as shields. They turned their mining equipment into weapons. They made us fight for every meter of space. And the civilians? Gone, every single one. 3 million people evacuated in 72 hours. Velthas stopped pacing, but that was not the strangest part. Judge Mordoun leaned back. Continue. When we finally took the mining facility, we found our wounded soldiers, Corvani warriors who had been shot down during the battle. The humans could have left them to die. Instead, they had moved them to safety, fed them, given them medical care. The judge's 3 eyes widened. They treated enemy wounded. More than that. Dr. Park So-jin, their chief medic, had stayed behind with 6 other humans. They refused to evacuate with the civilians. They said someone needed to care for our soldiers until we arrived. Velthas's voice cracked slightly. Dr. Park So-jin spoke our language. She had learned it in just 2 years since first contact. She greeted me when I entered the medical bay. She said, Commander, your warriors fought bravely. They are healing well. The courtroom was completely silent now. I asked her why. Why risk her life for enemy soldiers? Do you know what she said? Judge Mordoun shook his head. She said, They are not enemies now. They are patients. That is what we do. We heal. Velthas looked directly at the judge. Then she handed me a data pad with complete medical records for each of our wounded. Treatment plans. Medicine they would need. She had used their limited supplies to save our people. What happened to Dr. Park So-jin? I let her go. My military advisors said I was weak, that I should arrest her for intelligence gathering. But I could not. She had saved the lives of my soldiers when she could have let them die. Velthas returned to his position before the judges. That was my first lesson about humans, Your Honor. They do not fight wars the way we do. Explain. We fight to win, to destroy our enemies, to take what we want. Velthas paused. Humans fight to protect, even when it costs them victory. Judge Mordoun made notes on his tablet. This is just one incident, Commander. The charges against humanity cover dozens of battles. Yes, Your Honor. And in every battle, humans did things that made no military sense, things that should have been weakness. but somehow they made those things into strength. Give me another example. Velthas thought for a moment. The battle for Hadrian's world. Humans were surrounded. Outnumbered 10 to 1. They should have surrendered. Instead, they sent me a message, and what kind of message? Lieutenant Kim Do-hyun, their squad leader, said they had analyzed our battle tactics. He said we were making 3 critical mistakes that would get more of our soldiers killed. He offered to teach us better ways to fight. The judge blinked all 3 eyes in surprise. During the battle? During the battle. He said, "We are going to fight you and we will probably die. But we do not want your soldiers to die because of poor tactics. Here is how you can attack us more safely. Did you listen?" Velthas nodded slowly. I did, and he was right. His suggestions saved the lives of 200 Corvani warriors during that battle. But they still fought you? Oh yes, they fought harder than any species I had ever faced. But they fought smart. They forced us to be better warriors. They made us think about every decision. Judge Morden set down his tablet. Commander, these stories do not sound like war crimes. No, Your Honor, they do not. That is why I am here. Velthas stood straighter. Humans are not guilty of war crimes. They are guilty of something much more dangerous. What? They are guilty of making war itself obsolete. The judge stared at the commander. Explain. They showed us a different way to fight. A way where victory means everyone survives. Where strength means protecting the weak. Where the best warriors are the ones who can make peace. Velthas looked around the courtroom. Your Honor, I have 5 more stories to tell you. Each one stranger than the last. By the end, you will understand why humanity terrifies every military commander in the galaxy. Judge Morden nodded slowly. Continue, Commander. We will hear all of your testimony. Velthas straightened his shoulders. The hardest stories were still to come. Judge Morden adjusted his position in the chair. Commander, tell us about Hadrian's world. You mentioned Lieutenant Kim Do-hyun. Velthas nodded. The memory was still clear in his mind even after months. Hadrian's world was supposed to be simple. Industrial planet. Factories and warehouses. The humans had one small garrison protecting a refugee evacuation route. How many humans? Maybe 300 soldiers. My force had 8,000 warriors plus air support. Velthas clicked his tongue. The human position was hopeless. They had no ships in orbit. No heavy weapons. Just small arms and whatever they could find in the factories. The commander walked closer to the judges. Lieutenant Kim Do-hyun was young for a human. Maybe 25 standard years. His squad held the main intersection in the city center. 12 humans against my entire advance force. What was their strategy? That is what confused me. They did not try to break out. They did not try to hold the high ground. Instead, they invited us into the city. Judge Morden frowned. Invited you? Kim Do-hyun sent a message on open channels. He said, Commander Velthas, we know you will take this city. But if you come into the streets, many of your soldiers will die. The buildings are old. The walls are weak. Urban combat will be expensive for both sides. Velthas paused, remembering the strange conversation. Then he made an offer. He said, we will fight you in the city if that is what you want. But we would prefer to fight you properly. Give us 1 day to prepare defensive positions. We will show you how humans really fight. Did you accept? I should have said no. Military doctrine says you never give an enemy time to prepare. But I was curious. What could 300 humans do in 1 day? The commander's expression grew darker. I learned the answer. They could turn an entire city into a nightmare. Explain. Sergeant Yoon Mi-rae was their combat engineer. In 24 hours, she turned every building into a fortress. Not with advanced technology, with rope and metal scraps and explosives made from factory chemicals. Velthas began pacing again. But that was not the clever part. The clever part was the psychology. Psychology? Every trap they built was designed to give us choices. Hard choices. Velthas stopped walking. For example, they would block a street with a barrier. The barrier looked weak. We could break through it easily. But breaking through meant destroying a building full of refugee supplies. Judge Morden made notes. They used civilians as shields? No, that is what made it so difficult. They had evacuated all civilians first, but they left behind medical supplies, food, water, toys for children. Things that refugees would need. I do not understand. Neither did I at first. Then I realized what they were doing. They were making us choose between military efficiency and basic decency. Velthas's voice grew frustrated. If we destroyed the supplies, we could advance quickly. But then we would be the kind of soldiers who destroy food meant for hungry children. If we preserved the supplies, we had to take longer routes. More dangerous routes. What did you choose? I chose to preserve the supplies. My soldiers thought I was weak, but I could not bring myself to destroy medicine meant for sick refugees. The commander sat down in the witness chair. That was just the beginning. Private Choi Woo-jin had filled every empty building with recorded messages. Messages? Personal messages. From our families back home. Veltas's voice grew quiet. Somehow humans had intercepted our personal communications. But instead of using them for intelligence, they played them for us as we moved through the city. What kind of messages? A recording of my daughter singing a song she learned in school. A message from Warrior Keth's mate telling him about their new egg hatching. Commander Zor's father giving advice about leadership. Judge Mordoon looked confused. Why would they do that? To remind us that we were people, not just soldiers. Every time we entered a building, we heard voices from home. It made fighting harder. Velthas stood up again. Captain Nam Jin-ho commanded the human defense. On the second day of fighting, he sent me another message. He said, "My commander, you are losing too many soldiers. You are attacking the wrong buildings." He was helping you again. Yes, he told us which routes were safest. Which buildings were empty. Which areas had the most traps. Velthas shook his head. He was literally telling us how to defeat him more efficiently. Why? He said, "We are going to lose this battle. We know that, but we do not want to win by making you pay too high a price. That would not be victory. That would just be waste." The judge leaned forward. What happened next? We fought for 6 days. 6 days of the strangest combat I have ever experienced. The humans fought harder than any enemy I had faced, but they also showed more concern for our casualties than some of our own commanders. Velthas's tail swished nervously. On the 3rd day, Sergeant Yoon Mi-rae was wounded badly. Plasma burn across her chest. She should have been evacuated. Instead, she stayed at her post and continued giving us advice about safe routes through her own minefields. She helped you avoid her own traps? Yes, she said, "I built these traps to slow you down, not to kill you. Here's how to disarm them safely." Veltas clicked his tongue. She died on the 5th day, but even while dying, she was more worried about our soldiers than herself. The courtroom was silent for a long moment. Commander, what was the final outcome? We took the city on the 6th day. The last human position was the central command post. Lieutenant Kim Do-hyun and 8 soldiers. They had no ammunition left. No explosives, nothing. Did they surrender? No, Kim Do-hyun sent one final message. He said, "Commander Velthas, thank you for fighting honorably. We have delayed you long enough. The refugees are safe. We surrender our weapons, but not our principles." Velthas walked to the center of the room. When we entered the command post, we found something incredible. The humans had prepared detailed tactical analyses of our performance during the battle. What kind of analyses? Everything. Our strengths, our weaknesses, our habits. Which units worked well together? Which commanders made good decisions under pressure? They had studied us like scientists studying specimens. Why? Kim Do-hyun handed me the reports personally. He said, "Commander, you are a good leader, but you could be better. These reports will help you keep more of your soldiers alive in future battles." Judge Mordoon set down his tablet. "They were training you?" That is what I thought at first. But it was more than training. Velthas paused. They were trying to make us better warriors. Not better at killing. Better at protecting our people. What happened to the human survivors? We captured 17 humans alive. Military protocol said we should interrogate them for intelligence. Instead, they spent their time in detention teaching our medics new surgical techniques. Velthas returned to his position before the judges. "Your Honor, the battle for Hadrian's world should have been a simple victory. We outnumbered them. We had better weapons. We had air support. But the humans turned it into a learning experience. They made us question everything we knew about warfare. They showed us that the real victory was not taking the city. The real victory was everyone going home alive." Judge Morden made more notes. "Commander, these tactics sound almost educational." Exactly. That is what made fighting humans so terrifying. They were not trying to defeat us. They were trying to teach us. Teach you what? Velthas looked directly at the judge. That there might be a better way to solve problems than killing each other. Judge Morden looked at the time display on his tablet. They had been in session for hours, but Velthas showed no signs of fatigue. "Commander, your next testimony concerns the battle at Titan's Eye Orbital Station." Velthas nodded grimly. That battle changed everything I believed about medical ethics in warfare. Explain the situation. Titan's Eye was a research station orbiting a gas giant. Three-way battle. Humans, my Corvani forces, and the Nexus Collective. Velthas paused. The Nexus are artificial beings. Robots, you might call them. Very advanced. Very dangerous. What were you fighting over? The station had quantum research data. Weapons technology. Whoever controlled it would have a major advantage in the war. The commander's expression darkened. None of us got the advantage we expected. Judge Morden gestured for him to continue. The battle lasted 18 hours. Space combat around the station, boarding actions inside. My flagship took heavy damage early in the fight. Life support failed. I was in a fighter craft when Nexus forces disabled my engines. Velthas touched a scar on his neck. Plasma conduit explosion. Severe burns, broken bones, internal bleeding. My fighter was drifting toward the gas giant. I would have died in 20 minutes. What happened? The human medical frigate Mercy changed course to intercept me. Velthas shook his head. This was during active combat. Nexus fighters were still attacking, but Dr. Bei Sunho ordered his ship to leave the battle to rescue me. A human ship rescued you, not just me. The Mercy was already damaged. Hull breaches, failing power systems, but Dr. Bei Sunho had received distress signals from 43 disabled craft. Corvani, human, even Nexus units. Velthas began pacing. The logical choice was to rescue their own people first. Humans understand battlefield priorities, but that is not what they did. What did they do? Dr. Bei Sunho made a list. Not based on species or military rank, based on medical priority. Who was most severely injured? Who could be saved with immediate treatment? Who needed help first? The commander stopped walking. I was third on the list. A Nexus artificial intelligence was first. A human pilot was second. Judge Morden frowned. They prioritized enemy wounded over their own people. Worse than that, Your Honor. They prioritized artificial beings. The Nexus are not even biological. They are machines with consciousness. Most species do not consider them truly alive. But the humans did. Corpsman Li Yunji brought the damaged Nexus unit aboard first. I watched her work on it through the airlock window. She was trying to repair its central processor. Talking to it like it was a person. Velthas's voice grew softer. The Nexus unit kept saying, I am not alive. Save organic beings first. But Li Yunji said, you think, therefore you are alive. Everyone gets treatment here. What was your condition when they brought you aboard? Critical. Dr. Bei Sunho had to choose between using his advanced surgical equipment on me or saving it for human casualties that would come later. Velthas touched his chest. He chose me. Why? He said, you are here now. They are not yet. I treat the patient in front of me. The commander's voice cracked slightly. He used his best equipment, his rarest medicines, his most experienced surgical team to save an enemy commander. Judge Morden made notes. How long did this continue? 18 hours. The Mercy kept rescuing everyone they could reach. Humans, Corvani, Nexus units. Field medic Oji-hoon worked without stopping. No food, no rest, no breaks. What about their own wounded? That was the strangest part. Major Kang Tae-ho, their military commander, was severely injured. Leg nearly severed, massive blood loss. But he refused treatment. Why? He said his people should be treated in order of medical priority, just like everyone else. He would not take resources from more critically wounded enemies. Velthas shook his head. His own soldiers had to threaten to mutiny before he accepted medical care. The commander sat down heavily. After 12 hours, the Mercy started having serious problems. Life support was failing. They were running out of medical supplies. The ship could not support everyone they had rescued. What did they do? Dr. Bei Sunho called a meeting. All the medical staff. He explained the situation. They had enough life support for maybe half the people on board. Velthas paused. Then he asked for volunteers. Volunteers for what? To give up their life support rations. To transfer their oxygen allocations to the patients. The commander's voice was barely above a whisper. Every single human medical worker volunteered immediately. Judge Morden leaned forward. All of them? All 34. Dr. Bei Sunho, Li Yunji, Oji-hoon, everyone. They said patients come first. They would share what little life support remained and hope rescue ships arrived in time. Did rescue ships arrive? Velthas nodded slowly. My forces and the human fleet both responded to the distress call. We arrived to find the Mercy drifting powerless. Emergency power only. What did you find aboard? 208 rescued casualties. Corvin, a human nexus, all alive, all receiving medical care. Velthus's voice broke. And 34 human medical personnel in various stages of oxygen deprivation. How many survived? The patients? All of them. Every single rescued casualty survived. Velthus looked down. The medical staff? We lost 17 of them. The courtroom was completely silent. Dr. Bei Sunho was unconscious when we boarded. Severe oxygen deprivation, but alive. When he woke up in my medical bay, the first thing he asked was whether all the patients were okay. Not about his own staff? No. He asked about the patients first. When I told him his people had died to save enemies, he said, "That is what we do. That is who we are." Velthus stood up again. Your Honor, I have commanded medical units for 15 years. I understand battlefield medicine. Save your own people first. Treat allies before enemies. Prioritize military personnel over civilians. Standard doctrine? Yes, but humans follow different rules. They treat the most injured first, regardless of species. They consider artificial beings equal to organic life. They will die to save their enemies. Judge Morden set down his tablet. Commander, was this an isolated incident? No, Your Honor. I researched human military medical doctrine after this battle. It is official policy. Human medics are required to treat enemy wounded. They take an oath. What kind of oath? They swear to preserve life, regardless of species, regardless of politics, regardless of personal cost. Velthus walked toward the judges. They promised to see patients, not enemies. And this is official military policy? More than policy. It is part of their basic training. Human combat medics spend more time learning enemy biology than their own weapon systems. The commander paused. They study how to heal species they might have to fight. Why would they do that? Velthus looked directly at Judge Mordoun. Because they believe something that no other species believes. What? They believe that healing an enemy is the strongest possible victory. That showing mercy to someone trying to kill you is the ultimate demonstration of strength. Do you agree with them? Velthus was quiet for a long moment. Your Honor, Dr. Bei Sunho saved my life when he could have let me die. His people died to keep me alive. How can I ever fight against someone who values my life more than his own? You cannot, exactly. That is why human medical doctrine is so dangerous. It does not just save lives. It makes war impossible. Judge Morden stretched his arms. The testimony had been going for hours, but each story was more surprising than the last. Commander Velthus, you mentioned the agricultural world of New Ceres. Yes, Your Honor. New Ceres was our final offensive. The battle that should have ended human resistance in this sector. Velthus's expression grew thoughtful. Instead, it ended my understanding of military strategy. Set the scene for us. New Ceres supplied food for 12 human colonies. Massive farms, automated harvesting, huge storage facilities. If we took New Ceres, the human colonies would starve. The commander paused. It should have been a simple conquest. How large were the opposing forces? My invasion fleet had 15,000 warriors, 50 combat ships, and full orbital support. The humans had maybe 2,000 soldiers and no space vessels. Velthus clicked his tongue. Colonel Park Jinwoo commanded their defense. He was experienced but vastly outnumbered. Judge Morden made notes. What was their defensive strategy? That is what confused me. They did not build fortifications. They did not establish defensive lines. Instead, they sent me a message 3 days before we arrived. What kind of message? Colonel Park Jinwoo said, Commander Velthus, we know you will take this planet. We cannot stop you, but we can choose how we lose. Velthus shook his head. Then he made a strange request. What request? He asked for 1 week. He said, give us 7 days and we will make this conquest as easy as possible for you. No traps, no guerrilla warfare, no civilian casualties. The judge frowned. They offered to surrender without fighting? Not surrender. They offered to lose efficiently. Velthus began pacing. Park Jinwoo explained that fighting would destroy the planet's agricultural systems. Farms would burn. Equipment would be wrecked. The land would be useless for years. So they wanted to preserve the planet's value? For us, yes. They said, if you must conquer New Ceres, at least you should get something useful out of it. The commander stopped walking. I was suspicious but curious. What could they do in 1 week that would matter? Did you agree? I gave them 5 days. I thought they might be planning some desperate defense. Velthas's voice grew puzzled. Instead, they did something I still do not fully understand. Judge Morden leaned forward. What did they do? They turned the entire planet into a farm. Velthas paused. Not just the existing farms. Every available space. City parks, empty lots, rooftops, indoor spaces. Captain Shin Hai-wan coordinated the effort. They expanded their agriculture? Expanded and accelerated. They used growth hormones, genetic modification, forced growth chambers. In 5 days, they grew more food than the planet usually produced in 6 months. The commander sat down, but that was just the beginning. Lieutenant Han Seok-jin was their demolitions expert. While the planet was growing food, he was preparing to destroy everything else. Everything else? All military infrastructure. Communication arrays, power plants, manufacturing facilities, spaceports. Anything that could help an occupying force control the planet. Judge Morden looked confused. That sounds like standard scorched earth tactics. I thought so too. But then Sergeant Lim Yu-jung started distributing the food. Velthas's voice grew amazed. Not just to human forces. To everyone. Everyone. My advanced scouts who had landed early. Corvani intelligence operatives. Even automated supply drones from my fleet. The commander shook his head. They were feeding their enemies. Why would they do that? I asked Park Jin-woo the same question. He said, "You will be living on this planet for months or years. You should eat well while you are here." Velthas stood up again. On the final day, they began the strangest military operation I have ever witnessed. Explain. They called it graceful withdrawal. Every human soldier participated. They dismantled their own defensive positions and gave us detailed maps of where everything had been located. They showed you their defensive plans, not just showed us. They explained why each position had been chosen, what its strengths and weaknesses were, and how we could use those positions more effectively. The commander walked toward the judges. Lieutenant Han Seok-jin personally guided my engineers through the demolition sites. He explained what had been destroyed and why, and helped us understand how to rebuild everything more efficiently. They were teaching you how to occupy their own planet? Better than that. They were teaching us how to be good occupiers. Velthas paused. Captain Shin Hai-won left detailed agricultural schedules. When to plant, when to harvest, how to maintain the equipment. She said, "This planet has fed millions of people for decades. It should continue to do that regardless of who controls it." Judge Morden set down his tablet. What happened when your forces actually landed? We found a planet prepared for occupation. Not defended against it, prepared for it. Velthas's voice grew thoughtful. Every building had signs in Corvani language explaining what it was used for. Every piece of equipment had instruction manuals translated into our script. The humans had learned your language, not just learned it, mastered it, technical terms, military vocabulary, cultural expressions. They had prepared for occupation like other species prepare for war. The commander returned to his position, but the strangest part was the entertainment. Entertainment? Music, books, games, art, all translated into Corvani. They had prepared recreational activities for occupying forces. Velthas shook his head. They said soldiers far from home get lonely and bored. Bored soldiers cause trouble. Here are things to keep your people happy. What was the final result? We occupied New Ceres without firing a single shot. No casualties on either side. No destruction of civilian infrastructure. No guerrilla resistance. Velthas paused. It was the most efficient conquest in military history. And the humans? They withdrew to designated areas and continued farming. Park Jin-woo offered to manage agricultural production under Corvani oversight. He said, "We know this land better than anyone. Let us keep growing food for everyone." Judge Morden looked puzzled. "Commander, this does not sound like a defeat for the humans." That is what I realized later. They had not been defeated. They had been, what is the word, promoted? Promoted? We controlled the planet militarily, but they controlled everything else. Food production, equipment maintenance, local knowledge, worker relations. Velthas clicked his tongue. Within a month, my occupation force was completely dependent on human cooperation. How so? The farming equipment only worked properly when humans operated it. The crop schedules only made sense to people who understood the local weather patterns. The food distribution networks required human organizational skills. The commander's voice grew frustrated. We had conquered the planet, but we could not run it without human help. What did you do? We asked them to stay, to keep managing the farms under our supervision. Velthas paused. Park Jinwoo said, "Of course. That was the plan all along." "The plan?" He explained that humans had studied Corvani military doctrine. "We are excellent conquerors but poor administrators. We prefer to rule through local leaders whenever possible." Velthas walked back toward the center of the room. The humans had engineered their own defeat to take advantage of our administrative weaknesses. They wanted to be conquered? Not conquered, absorbed. They became essential to our occupation force. Within 6 months, Corvani and human personnel were working together so closely that the distinction became meaningless. Judge Mordun made extensive notes. What was the long-term outcome? New Ceres became the most productive agricultural world in the sector. Corvani and human techniques combined to increase food production by 40%. Velthas's voice grew admiring. It was better than it had been under pure human control. And militarily? Irrelevant. You cannot fight people who are essential to your own survival. The commander looked directly at the judge. The humans had found a way to make conquest meaningless. How? By making themselves more valuable as partners than as subjects. By showing us that cooperation produced better results than domination. Velthas returned to his position before the judges. "Your Honor, the battle for New Ceres taught me that humans do not think about winning and losing the way we do." "How do they think about it?" "They think about what happens after the fighting stops. They plan for peace while we plan for war." Judge Morden checked the time again. They had been in session for most of the day, but he needed to hear this final testimony. "Commander, we come to the battle for Earth itself." Velthas nodded gravely. "The battle that changed everything, Your Honor. The battle that made me understand what humans really are." Set the context for us. The Galactic Alliance had finally reached the human home system. 47 different species, over 300 ships, 2 million warriors. The commander's voice grew somber. It was the largest military force ever assembled. And the human defenses? Pathetic. Maybe 50 ships, most of them converted civilian vessels. Their orbital defense platforms were decades old. They had no allies, no reinforcements coming. Velthas paused. Any military analysis said they should surrender immediately. Judge Morden leaned back. But they did not surrender. No. Admiral John Minseo sent a message to the Alliance fleet. She said, "We welcome you to our home system. Before we begin fighting, we have something we would like to share with you." What did they want to share? Intelligence data. Complete tactical analyses of every species in the Alliance fleet. Velthas's voice grew amazed. Ship designs, weapons capabilities, command structures, strategic doctrines, everything. The judge frowned. They were sharing military intelligence? Not sharing it with us. Sharing it with everyone. The commander stood up. Admiral Jian Minseo broadcast the data on open channels. Every ship in the Alliance fleet received detailed information about every other ship in the Alliance fleet. Why would they do that? That is what I asked. Captain Ryu Dongho, their fighter squadron leader, explained it to me personally. Velthas began pacing. He said, "Commander Velthas, we have studied your species for 2 years. We know exactly how to defeat Corvani forces." That sounds like a threat. I thought so too. But then he said, "We also know exactly how the Zentari can defeat you, and how the Morphic Collective can defeat the Zentari, and how the Void Speakers can defeat the Morphic Collective." Velthas stopped pacing. Then he asked me a question that I still think about every day. "What question?" He said, "Commander, what happens when everyone knows how to defeat everyone else?" Judge Morden considered this. Military stalemate, exactly. But more than stalemate. Commander Song Ye-jin, their tactical officer, had spent months analyzing the psychology of each species in the Alliance. What did she learn? That we all fight differently. Corvani preferred direct assault. Zentari used stealth tactics. The Morphic Collective relies on superior technology. Velthas resumed pacing. But we all fight to win. That seems obvious. That is what I thought. But Song Ye-jin said, "What if winning became impossible?" The commander's voice grew thoughtful. She had calculated that if every species knew how to counter every other species, battles would become incredibly expensive and produce no decisive victories. What was her point? That species would stop fighting because fighting would become pointless. Velthas sat down. But the humans took it further than that. How? General Moon Kyung-ho commanded their orbital defenses. Instead of fighting the Alliance fleet, he invited us to a conference. Judge Morden looked surprised. A conference? During a battle? Not during a battle. Instead of a battle, Velthas's voice grew amazed. Moon Kyung-ho said, we could fight each other and destroy everything. Or we could talk about why we are fighting and see if there is a better solution. Did you attend this conference? I did. So did commanders from 30 other species. The commander paused. It was the strangest military meeting I have ever experienced. Why? Because the humans did not try to negotiate surrender terms or tactical agreements. They talked about what would happen after the war. Veltha stood up again. Admiral Jeon Minseo presented her analysis of galactic politics. She said the real problem was not human expansion. The real problem was that every species was afraid of every other species. Fear drives expansion. Exactly. Each species conquers neighbors to create buffer zones, but that threatens other species who expand to create their own buffers. The commander's voice grew excited. It is an endless cycle that can only end with one species controlling everything, or with everyone destroying everyone else. Yes, and the human said that was unacceptable. Veltas walked toward the judges. So they proposed something radical. What? That they would become the galaxy's military advisors. Not leaders, not conquerors, advisors. Judge Morden frowned. Explain. Every species would have access to human military analysis. We would all know each other's strengths and weaknesses. We would all have equally effective defensive capabilities. That would create permanent stalemate. Not stalemate. Balance. Velthas's voice grew passionate. The humans had calculated that if no species could achieve decisive military advantage, species would be forced to resolve conflicts through negotiation instead of warfare. And they offered to maintain this balance. More than that, they offered to help every species develop better defenses against every other species. The commander paused. They would make conquest impossible by making everyone equally strong. What was the reaction of the Alliance commanders? Confusion at first, then suspicion. Commander Torvek of the Zentari said, "This is a trap. You want to weaken us all so humans can dominate." Velthas's expression grew admiring. That is when Admiral Jeon Minseo made her final offer. Which was? She said, "You are right to be suspicious, so we will prove our intentions." The commander's voice grew amazed. Then she transmitted complete technical specifications for every human military system. Everything? Everything. Ship designs, weapon blueprints, defensive systems, tactical manuals. 2 years of human military development given freely to their enemies. Judge Morden set down his tablet. That sounds like suicide. That is what I thought. But Captain Ryu Dong-ho explained the logic. Veltas began pacing again. He said, "If you know exactly how our systems work, you can build defenses against them. That means we cannot conquer you. But you also cannot conquer us because we will help your enemies build defenses against you. Mutual assured defense." Exactly. But the humans went even further. The commander's voice grew excited. General Moon Kyung-ho offered to train Alliance military personnel in human tactical doctrines. They wanted to teach their enemies how to fight effectively while minimizing casualties, how to achieve military objectives without causing unnecessary destruction. Velta stopped pacing. How to fight wars that everyone could survive. What was the final outcome? 23 species accepted the human proposal immediately. 15 others agreed after extensive negotiation. The commander's voice grew satisfied. Only 9 species rejected the offer entirely. And those 9 found themselves facing an alliance of 38 species, all trained in human defensive tactics, all sharing intelligence about the holdout species' military capabilities. Veltas returned to his position before the judges. Within 6 months, the 9 holdout species had joined the agreement. Not because they were defeated, but because fighting had become too expensive and ineffective to be worthwhile. Judge Morden made extensive notes. "Commander, what is the current status of the human home system?" "It has become the military academy for the galaxy. Species send their best officers to Earth to learn human tactical doctrines." The commander's voice grew respectful. Not how to conquer, but how to defend. How to make war too costly for aggressors. And humanity's role in galactic politics? They have no political power. They control no territory outside their own system. They have no economic leverage over other species. But they have made themselves indispensable. Every species depends on human military advice for defense. Every conflict is resolved through human-mediated negotiation. Velthus looked directly at Judge Morden. Your Honor, humans achieved something that no species in galactic history has ever accomplished. What? They conquered the entire galaxy without fighting a single battle for conquest. The commander's voice grew amazed. They won by making winning impossible. How do you mean? They redefined victory. Instead of defeating enemies, they eliminated the concept of enemies. Instead of conquering territory, they conquered the idea of conquest itself. Judge Morden was quiet for a long moment. Commander, in your opinion, should humanity be charged with war crimes? Velthus straightened his shoulders. Your Honor, humanity should be charged with the greatest crime in galactic history. The judge leaned forward. Which is? Making war obsolete.